Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Pen Vicarage on this lovely Thursday morning. Great to see you, and I'm so glad you could join us for our Bible talk today, and I hope you find it helpful. Today's Bible reading is a really good one, but they're all really good, aren't they? But it's a lovely one this morning, and I wanted to set the scene first. It's the last few verses of Mark chapter 10. To sort of give you the context, because the context is always really, really important. For 8 chapters, Jesus has been going around the area, the northern area principally, preaching, teaching, healing, that sort of stuff. Then from chapter 9, he sets his face and goes towards Jerusalem, really, for the cross and the resurrection and so on. And to give you some idea how close he's got to here we are now. This morning's reading takes place in Jericho. Now, you might not be able to see it on this map, but Jerusalem is there. Jericho is there. That is 15 miles from Jerusalem to Jericho to Jerusalem. To give us some idea also, that is a massive geological fault. That's the Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth. So it's pretty much all uphill from there to there. So here this morning's reading happens in Jericho. Just when he's leaving Jericho, he's about 15 miles from Jerusalem. So we're getting close to where it's all going to happen. And so without further ado, I shall tell you what happens. It's Mark's Gospel, chapter 10, starting to read at verse 46. They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples, Jesus and his disciples, and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he's calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right, this is a wonderful story, and it's absolutely rammed full of irony, but lovely stuff, and I'll try and explain it to you. The first thing to say is this, as I've explained quite a lot recently, Mark's Gospel has got 16 chapters in. It's got the first 8 chapters and the second 8 chapters. The first 8 chapters, you have Jesus principally going around the Galilee region, preaching, teaching, healing, that sort of thing. And in chapter 9 to the end, he goes towards Jerusalem, and eventually, of course, he dies and rises again. And so the first half is about preaching, healing, teaching. The second half is principally about the cross and about Jerusalem and so on. And yet here we have this story in chapter 10 in the second half, but it kind of feels like it should really belong in the first half because Jesus is healing someone. But you could ask, why isn't it? Well, I think it happened when it happened. And I think it's just such a good story that I think Mark felt he had to mention it because it's so full of meaning that even though it's in the second half and probably feels like it should be in the first half, he leaves it in the second half anyway because it's such a fantastic reading. That's the first thing. Second thing to say about it is that to demonstrate the fact that it's a really, really important reading, it's the only time in Mark's Gospel where Mark actually gives us the name of the person that's healed. Usually you get a woman or you get a little girl or whatever it would be, but it's the only time ever you actually get the name of the person. And he's called Bartimaeus, which, as it says here, Bar means son of. So Bartimaeus means son of Timaeus. You get that a few times. So like in the few chapters' time, we're going to get Barabbas, Bar-Abbas, son of Abbas. It's a bit the same in English. Words like Peterson or Johnson or So Bartimaeus means son of Timaeus. That's it too. So it's the only time you actually hear the name of the person. So I think what Mark is saying is this is a really, really important reading. And Bartimaeus clearly did very, very well, which is why I think it's so important to mention it. But the irony gets even stronger because here we have somebody who, what do we know about him? We know he's a beggar, so he hadn't got a lot of money. And yet what becomes clear from this reading is he was certainly rich in faith. He may not have had much money, but he was rich in faith. As Jesus comes by, he says, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And the great thing is that when the crowd try, "Oh, shut up, you silly man," you could kind of brush him off. He's not going to be outdone. His faith won't let him let go. He's persistent. He perseveres. He carries on. He's not going to let go until he's been blessed, until he's got his sight back. And I think this is a fantastic example of what faith should really be about. Faith isn't simply about agreeing to a doctrinal code. Faith is about trust. And all through the Bible, you get people who really trust God and are not going to let go. And including some quite difficult characters like Jacob and so on in the Old Testament. He's not going to let go until he's been blessed. And that kind of perseverance, that persistent faith, that faith that's never going to let go, is the kind of faith that the Bible clearly thinks is what faith is really all about. And Bartimaeus may have been poor in terms of money, but he wasn't going to let go. And I think we need to learn from that. I think as Christians, we need a lot more stickability, a lot more perseverance and persistence. People often give up quite quickly, but actually I think we need to be strong and not let go. And like Bartimaeus, not going to let go until he's encountered Jesus. So there's that. The other thing we know about him is that he was blind. He couldn't see. And yet, what does he call Jesus? Son of David. Now, Son of David was the word for the Messiah. In other words, he could see who Jesus was. And isn't it ironic that the scripture leaders, the Pharisees and all the kind of, the well-educated people and so on, they couldn't see who Jesus was, but this man who's blind could. So isn't it ironic that this blind man that couldn't see could actually really see what was going on? So that's another irony. But it doesn't kind of end there either, because I think it's interesting that yesterday's reading was all about James and John getting it spectacularly wrong and being ambitious. Today's reading is about a blind beggar, Bartimaeus. And in both cases, Jesus asked them the same question: what can I do for you? And whereas they, these great pillars of the church, these great heroic disciples, asked Jesus for the fame and glory, but we want to sit at the right hand of God. Here's Bartimaeus, this blind beggar on the side of the road. All he wants is his sight back, and because he wants to follow. And actually, he gets it right, whereas they get it wrong. So isn't it a beautiful irony there? They even puts the disciples to shame too. But there's still more irony. It doesn't end with this reading. It just gets fantastic. Because here's Jesus, as I say, 15 miles from Jerusalem. His mind must have been full of what was to come. The big showdown. He was about to die and rise for this was all just, and it was a matter of days away now. And Jesus could have just said, "You're healed." But actually, he goes and talks to Bartimaeus. He's actually got time for him. That even though this incredibly busy time of his life, Jesus still has time for this man. He dignifies him. He spends time with him. And I think there's a lesson for us that today, because we can get very, very focused, and I think we should actually, but we should always have time for people. And Jesus has time for this blind man, and he doesn't just say, "Okay, you're healed, job done." He actually calls him and talks to him and spends time with him, and I think that's really, really important. But the irony doesn't end there, because this man he gets his sight back, and then he gets up and he follows. And I think it's kind of interesting that he was sitting and going nowhere. And now he gets up and he follows on the way. So prior to this, prior to meeting Jesus, his life was going nowhere. He was just sitting there, going there, he was going nowhere. But after he met Jesus, he followed him on the way. His life got purpose. He gained a way, it gained direction. So meeting Jesus means that he found his way. And I think it's interesting. Jesus says to him, "Your faith has made you well." The same word is for made you well. It's the same word we use for saved. Your faith has saved you. You were going nowhere, but now you're on the way, he says. But I think there's a message to us too, that actually Christian faith is not simply about asking God to help us where we are now, but actually it's about the start of Christian discipleship. It's important that having met Jesus, we don't just stay where we are, but that we follow him on the way. That we don't just stick, in the present, but actually we continue to follow Jesus in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. That as Bartimaeus found direction in his life and he became a disciple of Christ, so should we. And when God does good things for us, we shouldn't just rejoice in what God's done, but whilst we should do. But actually it's important that we continue to follow Jesus and keep on following him and become disciples and followers in the way too. A lovely reading this, all sorts of ironies about this, about this blind beggar. He may have been blind, but he could see what other people couldn't see. He could see what was really going on. About this poor man who was incredibly rich in faith. That, he did better when questioned than these James and John, the great disciples. He did better than them in this situation. That even though Jesus was right at the coming to the high point of his mission, he still spends time with him. Actually, that his faith made him better, and that he followed Jesus on the way. And he went from being sitting and going nowhere to being a follower of Jesus on the way. And his life gained direction and purpose. And that's what he gives to us today. Lots in there. Read it at your leisure. It's a great reading. God bless you.